All right, so it looks like we'll get going. Seems like we've had enough people join by now. And so this is effective planning for a changing construction landscape. My name is Justin Desjardins with Revelwood. We are a platinum business partner of Workday, and we'll go over a little bit of that in a second. And you'll see today and learn about Workday Adaptive Planning and best practices in FP&A in the construction landscape, and how, get a good glimpse into how Workday Adaptive Planning can help you with that. The team on today's webinar, once again, I'm Justin Desjardins. I'm one of 5 account executives here at Revelwood. I'm also joined by our colleagues Lee and Alberto. Lee Lazaro is our planning practice leader, and Alberto Canas is our pre-sales solution consultant who's going to walk us through the actual demo of Workday Adaptive Planning today. So just a quick agenda on what we're going to cover in the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to go into a little bit more depth on who we are briefly. We're going to talk about who Workday Adaptive Planning is, and if you don't know about Workday, give you some background on them. We're going to talk about FP&A specifically in the construction space, as I mentioned. And then from there, we're going to hop right into the demo, try not to waste any time there. And then we'll wrap up with some final considerations that you'll want to keep in mind. And we'll talk about next steps if you want to reach out to us and have a conversation that we certainly hope we'll be able to have. So once again, we're a platinum business partner to Workday Adaptive Planning, and we're an award-winning partner. We're one of 4 exclusive partners to Workday in the small business market. That being said, we've done hundreds of implementations for businesses of all sizes. This includes large and mid-sized enterprises. We've been in this business for over 25 years. Our team has extensive experience in corporate finance and also in multiple different FP&A solutions. Over the past few years, we've been very focused on Workday because of how much the product has really leapfrogged the market. And we particularly specialized in the physical industries, which certainly includes the construction industry, real estate, manufacturing, energy. And so Workday comes to us as a partner for those industries. And if you're not too familiar with Workday, which you certainly might be, Workday is a $4+ billion company. The adaptive planning product specifically has over 5,800 customers globally. That's a huge number and more than double any of its competitors. Part of that is because the solution has a 97% customer retention rate, really high ratings by third-party research firms like Gartner, which you may know of. Workday has been ranked #1 on Fortune's Future 50 list for companies with best prospects for long-term growth, and that's globally. And that includes companies like Google, Tesla, Apple, you name it. So, this is a product that's being backed by a company that is moving forward and constantly reinvesting in the product. As I mentioned, tons of customers in all different industries. You can see some names there, specifically in the construction industry. You'll find many case studies on Adaptive's official website. And certainly if we follow up, we can talk about specific cases that we've done for other construction companies. So at the end of the day, what this is all about is streamlining the FP&A process. And the reality is that most companies aren't as efficient as planning as they need to be, especially in this modern day and age, where having an agile planning process is not a nice to have, but it's actually a mission critical. And we all know and love Microsoft Excel. It's a great personal planning tool, but it's not a collaborative multi-user solution. You still have to plan. So groups have to make do with sharing files and emailing, but it's not ideal. And so Workday Adaptive Planning is the platform that allows every function of the organization within your company to plan. And we see finance as being at the center, sort of orchestrating that process. And the beauty of adaptive planning is that each organization has its own journey, and adaptive makes it easy for you to take what we call a crawl, walk, run approach. So you can start off small if needed and expand to other areas of the business down the line. But just know that we can help any area of the business to model and plan. And hopefully what you're going to see today is that the software has 3 characteristics which are really key, which is easy, powerful, and fast. So when it's easy to use, you get the collaboration that you're looking for and the actual end user adoption that you're expecting. When it's powerful, you can continually fine tune the plan regardless of how complex the business gets. And of course, a fast solution is important, and that allows for comprehensive visibility into every level of every function. So Workday Adaptive was built in a multi-tenant in-memory engine, so you can always get performance and scale in real time. And modeling, reporting, and analytics are all done on the platform. There's no separate modules needed to perform your planning process from start to finish. So everything is done in Adaptive. And with the data integration framework, business users, and not just IT, can integrate with any of your source data systems, whether it's an ERP, CRM, HR system, whatever it may be. So as I alluded to, there's tons of great case studies on the website. McCarthy and Stone is a leading retirement house builder, but there's many, many great case studies. And at this point, we're going to dive into a little bit of the FP&A side, and I'm going to pass it over to Lee.
Thanks, Justin. So let's start out by talking about the basics of FP&A. In essence, what does adaptive planning do related to the planning, the reporting, and the analyses that help to support your corporate decisions? I like to break these tasks into 4 main categories. Okay? The first category that we look at is planning, and some people also reference this as budgeting. Okay? The details behind this consist of the various aspects of your income statement and your balance sheet planning. Okay? Some of the key elements that we see our customers dealing with are things like revenue and COGS. We see expenses where you're inputting values and getting calculated results. And we also see situations where there's expenses where you simply load your data points. And no matter which approach you use for the calculations, there are a whole host of ways that you could do your planning within the solution. The adaptive solution provides methods for each of these components within your planning model. We also talk about forecasting, and the adaptive solution lets you update all of your plans into what I like to differentiate as a forecast. So why do I consider this to be different? Well, first off, the forecast combines your externally loaded actual data with your updated planning data, whereas the planning will simply input the data. The forecasting is going to combine those 2 aspects. And secondly, the level of forecasting is often going to be different from your original budget. Many times people like to plan at one level. Usually that definitional level is accounts or time, but then they like to forecast at something that's a little bit more consolidated. Usually granular planning, consolidated forecasting in some way. But these calculations and these concepts of the data merges are once again part of the standard adaptive solution. The third aspect of the planning components that you do right now are the reporting. And this is where you're going to have your standard financial reports. You're going to talk about your income statement or your P&L. You're going to talk about your balance sheet. You're going to put the 2 pieces together, talk about your cash flow. Okay? And this is also where you're going to have the ability, and Justin, if you can go back 1 slide, please. This is also where we're going to have the ability to go a little bit more granular. This is where we're going to be able to slice and dice by department, by person, by product. And that ability to slice and dice your data is the main piece, one of the main pieces of what you're going to see in the demo today. Okay. The analysis now is where you put it all together. We saved the best for last. Putting this all together gives us the opportunity to take our planning, take our merging of actuals, take our reporting, and then analyze the data. This is where we could do some of our comparisons, looking at our actuals versus our plans, either on a dollar or a percentage basis. This is we're going to have the ability to report, and we're going to be able to look at some of the trends, the seasonality, historical trends, future planning. Okay. This is also where we're going to be able to think about what if something happens. We're going to look at a best case, worst case. A lot of people think of it as two what if plans, but I like to think of it as a third plan, also our most likely. Okay. And this is also where you want to think through, you don't want to limit yourself to a best case or a worst case or a most likely. Don't limit yourself to a single plan because variables happen. This gives us the opportunity to use them and create multiple plans. And then we can evaluate all of the results of that and then plan for those eventualities. Okay. Why do we look at it from these four perspectives? If we can go to the next slide, please, Justin. Okay. This is where FP&A comes in. Finance is the centerpiece to every one of these aspects. And as you can see on the slide, every one of these pieces eventually comes back to FP&A. For example, human resources works with FP&A for personnel planning. Sales is going to work closely with you for the top half of your P&L and also for your calculated COGS results. IT is going to need to be able to plan for things like remote access, costs associated with new subscriptions, new machines. But the key factor to all of this comes down to the timing. And you could see that on the slide. I've got a quote there I like to read. The frequency of how often you're going to do this is tied to how quickly the facts are changing and how quickly you can turn these facts into actionable intelligence. And that word actionable is very important. If you can't turn these facts around quickly, then your result might be out of date by the time you put it all together. This is why a fast and efficient planning solution is critical to your process. So everything that we looked at just now, and Justin, if I can ask you to reshare the screen, I think we might have lost it.
Yeah, it looks like we did.
Excellent. Okay. And if we can go to the next slide. What we just talked about is we just talked about generic finance concepts. Okay? But everyone on this call knows that the construction industry has some specific requirements that are needed for your planning and your reporting. Okay? So one of the things that you want to think about is you want to think about which accounting approach that you use. Maybe you're using the cash basis and you're recording your revenue when it's received and you're recording your expenses when the vendors are paid. Maybe you're using the accrual basis. You're recognizing your revenue as the work is completed and your expenses when they're incurred, even though this may not be when the money actually changes hands. Okay? Maybe you're using the POC approach, the percent of completion approach. Maybe you're doing your billing in stages for the work that you performed. Okay. And in that particular case, you record the earned revenue and the expenses at each stage. Okay. Three very different accounting approaches, but no matter which approach you use, we still need to ensure that we're following all our standard FASB accounting. For example, how are we going to do our revenue recognition? Okay. You also want to make sure in the construction industry that you're looking at your estimates. You need to ensure that you can track the modifications of your estimates. These modifications could be a result of many things. Maybe there were cost changes over time. Maybe you have change orders. Maybe it might even be a reflection of some initial estimating. You might have done it a little poorly initially. Okay. This makes it important to ensure that you have a really good approach for your variance reporting, mostly because of the potential ripple effect that you're going to have from changing your estimates. If your estimate changes, and if you're using the POC approach, well, your estimate changes, your percent of completion changes, which therefore causes changes to both the current and your future calculated results. Another thing different about construction is joint ventures. You might be working with a joint venture. The great thing about JVs is that you have the opportunity to get some additional financing. You have the opportunities to mitigate the overall risk. A lot of great things that come into play from a joint venture. Okay. But this all comes at a cost that your record keeping responsibilities are increased. This is going to require you to have a much more detailed record keeping and accounting process, and you need to introduce various methodologies. We also have some other aspects that are a little bit different in the construction industry, and one of your biggest ones is going to be overhead. You want to think about how you're going to allocate that overhead. These are going to be your expenses such as your rent, your office equipment, your administration costs. And it's also going to make you think about, how do I do that allocation? What are my allocation drivers? Do I use work hours? Do I use machine hours? Do I use units produced? The ultimate goal of your allocation is to ensure that your costs are assigned to the areas that benefit from that cost. So we want to ensure that we can properly calculate and spread the overhead costs. We also want to think about job costing or project costing. Okay. We want to make sure that we could properly analyze our jobs and our projects. Similar to product costing or departmental costing, we want to be able to analyze the profitability of our overall project while also being able to dig further into those details of the jobs within. Okay. And finally, we need to ensure that we could track other contract details, deposits received before the work begins, any amounts that are held back until the customer is satisfied, or any other reporting requirements that we need to distribute externally. And all these analytics lead into specific metrics that are applicable to the construction environment. Okay. This includes a series of metrics. There's going to be quality and performance metrics that could be used to define the project's productivity. Okay. There's also going to be compliance and regulatory metrics to help ensure the safety of the team. We want to think about cost and profitability results that start to bring us into the financial metrics. And of course, that leads us fully into the financial metrics such as EBITDA and expense to revenue calculations. Okay. So now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Alberto, who's going to show you the tool in action.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate that. Give me 1 second to share my screen. And here we go. So I am going to go and give you a nice little overview of the Workday Adaptive solution. Here you will see some examples of how the platform can be used for a construction type of organization. Bear in mind that what you are about to see is not set in stone. Adaptive is a solution that is extremely scalable and customizable to fit the various needs of different organizations. Because even though construction industry might have similar needs, not everyone is the same. So you'll definitely take advantage of adaptive customizable capabilities. So now to give you to start off, just a very, very quick run through of what's going on and what you're seeing here. These are just some of the main key areas that users will have access to once they're working within Adaptive. Bear in mind, excuse me, every user here is going to have their own particular ways of having access. So Adaptive does have very robust security features that really allows users, depending on what their needs are, to be working in the solution. I'm working currently as an administrator, so I'll be a power user, someone that has that full access rights. But if you want to really limit, certain project managers that should only be working on their particular project that they're responsible for, or department heads, you name it, there's a lot of ways you can set that up. So running through really quickly, then I'll jump right in and give you a nice little overview, as I mentioned. The Sheets section here, this is where you will be able to create all the various ways that you want to plan your organization's budget. You're going to hear something that I will say continuously throughout the demonstration, and that is, as I mentioned, the solution is very scalable. So you'll be able to really create as many of these different sheets that you'll need. And there are different ways that you can work in there with different nuances, and I'll cover them as I go along. So that's what the sheets are, where you're building the plans. Assumptions are different types of sheets that you can create. Some, for driver-based budgets that you might want to incorporate. Rates, if you want to define things like hours, just kind of one big area where you can create them. And again, create as many of these different sheets as you need. Obviously, reporting is very important. So you'll be able to create as many reports as needed as well. This is where you're creating those, as I like to call them, the standard row and column reports. Very standard, very typical, but I'll show you how that looks like. Dashboards are now where you can create the more eye-appealing look with graphs and charts, things like that. Taking all the data that's within the system and just giving it that nice little look. Consolidation really just gives users the ability, for any kind of true accounting consolidation needs, multiple companies with intercompany transactions, eliminations, maybe define some kind of adjustment that you want to incorporate here. You can definitely do that here. The processes and workflow, this section really allows users to give those lower level users a more focused way to work. So if you don't want them to work and have access to everything, you'll give them direct access just to those areas that you want them to work in, and then be able to give some kind of approval process. Formulas can be incorporated within Adaptive. It's not just about hand keying numbers into the solution. Definitely take advantage of this. Modeling is the back end of adaptive. This is where the main users are responsible for that kind of detail, creating the structure, creating different versions of the solution, unlimited versions to create any kind of need, right? Best case, worst case, what ifs, forecast versions, you name it. And then administration is just where you can define, some of the security aspects for your different users, what kind of users they are. And then integration. Adaptive has many different integration capabilities, not just with general ledgers like NetSuite, Intact, to name a couple, but also with CRMs, like one of the main ones out there, like Salesforce. You'll definitely be able to bring in that information into Adaptive, either on some kind of scheduler, monthly, daily, even if you want on a nightly basis. But you can also push the data into Adaptive on demand, right? Definitely helpful during the month end process where, changes are happening, nonstop throughout the day. So as changes happen, reload that information to Adaptive. If it's outside of your schedule, definitely have those options there for you. So now let's drop in and show you a little bit of some examples of what you'll be able to see and work with. So this I'm gonna go back into the sheets. This is one sheet I want to highlight for you. So this is a very standard sheet. This is the first type of sheet that you'll be able to create. Here you can see some of the key foundational elements that are existing throughout the solution. You have your time strata, right? So the solution really allows users to get down to the granularity they need. Most organizations look at details on a monthly, then rolling up to the quarterly into a yearly basis. But sometimes there are needs to get more granular, maybe daily to weekly, and then rolling up. Definitely have those options there. Then you have your level structure. That typically would be how you want to create or define your organizational details, departments, things like that, cost centers. Sometimes you actually may want to get down to maybe a project level. So as you look into it, just keep scrolling right down based on what your structure looks like. And you're going to see the bottom level, all your different projects right there. So just a different way to look at it. And then you have your version foundational element. As I mentioned, you'll be able to create however many versions as you want to. Your actuals are considered one, then you have your budget, maybe you have different forecasts or what ifs and things like that. So definitely have other options there. Now let me break it down for you a little bit. Let's get down to that lowest level. That's where the users are actually able to make changes and play around with their plan. So here you have it. So on the left-hand side, these are what would you be seeing as your account numbers, right? This is again an income statement. So you have your revenues, you have your COGS, you have your expenses down below, gross margins. But at the end of the day, this structure is going to be based on what you want, what you have, and what's important to you. These numbers here on the left that are grayed out in green, these represent your actuals. This is actually really key and really important, as my colleague Lee mentioned, how you may want to create some kind of a forecast version where now you have the ability to, as you load or have those actuals loaded into the solution, it'll know which version is going to go into a forecast version, and it'll overlay those actuals over those months of budget. So definitely a nice way to work. And again, you have that instant if that's how you had defined your integration capabilities. The white cells that you see across, these are just where you can go in and enter numbers right into them. As you can see, you can take advantage of just hand keying numbers. You can go in and copy paste. You can take advantage of some pretty nifty little options like a copy forward, just fills it in for you, or just go in and type in a full total number. I'm just putting something very random because not everything's always pretty straightforward. And as soon as you hit enter, gives you a breakback method, just shows you some of the intelligence that comes with adaptive, right? So you can see proportionally, just takes that total year number, breaks it back. So if you have in this version actuals in there, it'll subtract those months of actuals out of that total and break it back accordingly. Sometimes organizations like looking at last year's or a prior year's trend, and they can use that as a proportional based on those values. Some other ones incorporated here as well. So some options are at your disposal. Let me just save that down to show you. It's easy and quick to break that detail in. And there you have it. So now you have some other options here. These grayed out numbers, as you can see, these are all just different items that are available to you. Anything down below that has a little blue tick mark, that just represents that those items actually have actuals, or excuse me, they actually have formulas within there. And you can see the formula right up here, something very simple. But these formulas can be extremely robust. I mean, if then type of statement, something, if something is this, then this will happen, and so on. So different triggers that you'll be able to incorporate with these different formula capabilities. You can even go in and split numbers up, or as we like to call, say, budget below the account. So maybe something like printing and postage here. You can add a little split there, and maybe you have some expenses coming from different vendors or different stores, if you will. So maybe something like FedEx, right? Add another line as well. Maybe something like Staples or something. And now you can go right in and enter multiple details below that line. So that just gives you a little bit more granularity, and everything just rolls up to that account, that printing and postage account, whatever that may be. Of course, if you have that kind of granularity, that you have multiple or different types of accounts for the, one's printing, one's postage, and so on, you'll have that. We're enforcing and incorporating your entire chart of account structure, so you'll be able to really define that breakout as needed. So that's just a very simple way of working in and showing you how you can take advantage of some of these details there. But at the end of the day, it's not just those pretty standard, accounting kind of sheets. You also can get down to that granular detail. Maybe you want to get into something like a WIP schedule. Let me show you a little bit of this. So with this WIP schedule, you're able to really just see a different type of sheet. So all the sheets that you're going to see are Excel in nature, so it just makes it pretty comfortable. As Justin mentioned, everyone is pretty familiar and comfortable with Excel, so just kind of gives it that nice kind of feel. But here, this sheet is called a model sheet. This is where users really are going to get the flexibility that I mentioned earlier, that each sheet can be really customized for each particular user's point of view, their perspective. You'll always have to define the level structure. So again, as I mentioned, you're going to see that detail there. It's a pick list. You just define that. So if this one here is done by maybe projects, you can define a project manager, description, location. Again, these are all different dimensions that you might incorporate, or attributes, right? Attributes are descriptive tags that can also be incorporated. And you can see things like even dates, like start dates. If you want to define how long the project's going to last, prices, cost. If you want to, like I mentioned, an attribute, if you want to look at things like large, small, or mid-size type of projects. So that just gives you a little bit more information that you can just kind of say, all right, how many large projects do I have and what's the impact? So that just kind of helps down the line when it comes to what you can report on. Let me actually show you a little bit of detail behind the scenes here, right? So if I go into this row detail, you'll be able to see some of this information, right? So this project starts in March of 21. Let's scroll over a bit. And here we go. So now you're seeing all this information right in there, right? So all the details, terms, the countdown as it goes down by the months. You get all this information: revenues, pre-costs, pre-construction costs, percentage of complete, all that good stuff is right there for you. So you'll see the percent complete right there. That's really just at least a very simple calculation based on, the cost to date divided by the revised estimated cost. Then you have even more detail, like maybe your over billings, right? That's a liability. And that, when you define that detail, it will impact your balance sheet. And that's really just another simple calculation that's going to look at, just your cumulative billings, minus your cumulative revenue. So just gives you some look behind the scenes of what's actually going on, because here, this person might just care about, all right, which project is it, who's the manager, and some of these details, whereas all the other more finance details, accounting information, that's going to be more important to that finance team. So this could be really, really powerful for those budget contributors, those project managers, and then everyone else who needs to see the more granular information will see it. So let's see the next one. As I mentioned, a balance sheet. Have one there as well. So income statement, start with that one. Now a balance sheet. And that's what you'll see in here as well. So again, you'll see all the details based on what your structure is going to be. There's all your assets, there's your liabilities, and I mentioned there's your overbilling. So that's all just pulling from, at least in this instance, that WIP schedule that I just highlighted. So this here is, again, cash is the solve. You'll be able to see all those balance sheet balances here. You can even incorporate, some kind of balance sheet check, maybe a metric account, right? So again, even though we are incorporating your chart of account structure, those financial accounts, you're also able to incorporate any kind of non-financial metric account. Maybe you create some kind of custom account. Those all can be incorporated into all these sheets that you're seeing. Let's see, next one. Something that could happen at times. I think I heard Lee mention it, change orders, right? Because as much as we like to plan ahead, obviously we will, and we think that everything is going to go smoothly, some things always tend to change. Something happens. So that's what this is really just a simple, sheet, and we want to call it a change order, right? You can call it what you want, adjustments or, unforeseen accidents, anything you want, right? So this allows you to really just define what those are, based on which project those changes are going to, again, any kind of information that's necessary, what that change is, what the changes are, how much they are, and then you can put them in for approval. Those approval columns that you'll probably see a couple of times as well. It's nice because it's a trigger that allows you to just say, all right, I think this is going to happen based on what's going on, but I'm not going to approve it yet. And then down the line, as it gets closer, that's definitely going to happen. Then someone will, with access to that, will be able to approve it. And then all that detail will flow throughout and impact accordingly down the line. So, and even here, you're not limited, as I showed you, you can add those splits. You can do it here as well, right? So maybe a project has different types of changes that are going to happen. You'll be able to layer those in as well. Let's see, what's the next one that I can highlight for you? Projected bill hours. I think that's a good one. There we go. Okay, let me actually break this down for you a little bit differently. So this is now what we call this is the third type of sheet. Again, Excel, as I mentioned. This is what we call a cube sheet. So you can see it across the top. We have it right now just set up by levels. So, but you can see the accounts here, projected bill hours, and you can see some other dimensions, employee number, and things like that. So now you see them here, tasks, some kind of task or job that goes into that project, right? So definitely have all those layers here, and now you can, start playing around with what you want to look at. So let me show you a couple ways that you can look at this detail differently. So you can start layering the information, the dimensions in a way that makes sense and how you want to look at them. So I actually want to look at this way. Go by levels, look at it by my employee number, and then I think that's good. And you can see the task is just there, and then there's only going to be one account in this particular sheet, so you'll see break it down. So there you have it. So that's just a nice summary view to show you all your employees by that project. And it shows employee number. It could be, the actual names as project managers, you name it, you'll be able to incorporate it. So you have all that there. Maybe you want to look at a different way. Maybe you want to look at by, instead of levels employee number, you want to look at by that particular task that a particular employee is looking at. And then let me actually break this down to one of the lower levels, that project one. So we can just search like that. There's project one. And now here you can see each project manager can now come in here and then update all of their hours that are needed, or this detail, if it's held in a different, maybe an Excel file, an external Excel file, or another solution or a system, that data can be fed into here as well. So, but this just gives you, again, that ability for each in particular employee that has access to that particular project to go in and incorporate that detail for themselves. Very, very slick. But I just wanted to highlight those quick ways that Adaptive just gives this flexibility for different users to look at the information, in ways that make sense for them and how they might potentially want to work. Let's see, another one, it's maybe bill rates and target hours. So again, I'm really just going on these different sheets just to show you a little bit of, as I like to call it, the art of the possible, right? Just things that might look, like that may be helpful for you. So in here, It's just one way, again, another cube sheet. It's done at that top of the level, but keep going down the list to see that level that you want to look at. But here, this is where you can set the bill rates by labor category, right? Simple, right? So just gives you that list of how you want to look at it. Labor hours by category, you name it, you'll be able to incorporate it. Let's see. When it comes to the workforce, right? Maybe you have certain employees that are maybe the back office, right? The accounting team, the finance team that might not really be working by a project per se. So they're the back office, right? So maybe they have the indirect, and then you have those workers that are actually involved with the project, and they might be considered direct labor, right? So we just have an example here of a direct labor sheet. This here, you'll be able to, again, define the projects, the employees, their numbers. Again, more details. It's that modeled sheet concept that just allows you to incorporate the way you want it to look. Define their salaries. If you have, hourly wages, you can define those hours, start dates, end dates if you need to, a labor category. If you have some employees that might be union or non-union, or maybe they're contractors or subcontractors, that's what these, could potentially mean. So it's up to you how you want to really look at that information. Then same thing. The model sheets allows you to get down into this really to see all the granular detail behind the scenes, and you see all the bill rates, projected hours, what the projected billings are going to be. You'll see a social, Medicare, FUTA, all that details right there. And you can even see when you get into something like the Social Security, it actually drops off at the end, right? So that even allows you to see the intelligence that the adaptive lets users really build into it, right? Something like just defining that cap that goes into Social Security in Excel could be really difficult. In adaptive, you're just defining what that cap is, and once it hits it, the system knows to just shut it down and no longer calculate it. And these details are really just pulling from an assumption sheet. Let me actually show you one of those. So here's the assumptions, as I mentioned, and these are personnel. And there you have it. Very generic ones. Some of these might be pertinent, might be useful for you, but you can see here, days and month, year of necessary. Then you have some of your payroll taxes, your social, the max, the rates, Medicare, FUTAs, things like that, right? If you have commissions that you need to incorporate, bonuses, you name it, you'll be able to define those details into these sheets that then feed into, the people, depending on, what their elections are, their health insurance, if they have, if you have multiple, if you have, single, married, children, family, if you will, all those granular details can be built into adaptive, and then they'll fed into it. Just pick and choose which ones they go to, and the solution knows how to pick it all up. Maybe you want to take a look at, how you're spending, you're buying your materials from different vendors. Another different, very simple sheet, right? A cube sheet. You can define all your vendors there, define how you're spending and where you're spending them. Again, these could be based on formulas if necessary, but a lot of the times could just be just a plugged in number. But this is really, again, as I mentioned a few moments ago, really just to show you what you can do, that art of the possible, as I really like to say. And another really nice example right in here, this project approval sheet. So this is one that's, maybe you're adding more projects, but, a lot of the details, you don't want them to impact right away. So as you can see here, we have 3 levels of approvals. And as I mentioned, with the security that you can give to your different users, different types of users, right? Maybe you have the person that is responsible for entering the new project. That person can only incorporate maybe a project manager approval. Then it goes down to the program manager approval down the line, but it's not actually going to hit until it's fully approved down the line. Let me actually show you what I mean by that. So as I look into this one, just very simple, it's completely approved. Again, it's the start date, so 9/5/21. So there you have it. You'll see the countdown. You see all the associated costs that are coming from that particular project. If I now go to this one that's pending, or only pending in that middle, so obviously it's not gone down the line yet, 4/14. Here we go. There we go. Nothing. Now let me show you, once you actually make that go down the line, we'll approve it here, and we'll approve it here. We'll save that down. And let's take a look at that one again. And there it is, 414, 12 months. There it is, a 12-month project. So that's how easy it is to, again, define those dimensions and those triggers. And then as they keep going down the line, they'll easily be just included in the impacts. All your reporting will now be incorporating that impacts. If you want to do that from one version, not do it another, or change the rates and things like that, that's what allows you that flexibility to just create multiple versions, do whatever you want to them, and then easily see those changes and those variances if you need to. Which actually leads me now to the final part of my presentation, is the reporting piece, which I'm going to show you in 3 different ways, right? I'm going to show you the standard reporting that I mentioned, that row column report kind of structure. Then I'm going to show you some dashboard capabilities that are built into Adaptive that you can instantly utilize to see the visuals, as I mentioned. And then I'm going to come out into our Office Connect capabilities that is really, along with the dashboards, the Office Connect also, is really powerful when it comes to presentation reports and things like that. So, so now actually, as I mentioned, let's start with some reports. And same thing, you'll be able to create any kind of report that's necessary, as many as you need, from your financial statements, the standard ones, to anything else that you want. Let me show you just a couple of examples to show you that what's available. So let's go with this one first. Budget versus actual. Let's see, what's another one I can show you? Maybe approved project spend, pre-approved, and maybe a project manager, because again, everything can be incorporated. And I'm also going to create these reports, a report for you to show you how easy it can be, a dashboard as well. So as I mentioned, this is just a very simple, budget versus actual. In essence, it's an income statement. You can see your revenues, your COGS, your expenses, right? So all that detail is there for you. It's very powerful. These will be your accounts. Click into them, and you'll be able to break this report down by any kind of dimension, the levels, different attributes, different information that you've created, that you've included in your plan. So you really have that capability. And it's very easy to do so, right? So if I want to look at this report down to the level structure, just click into it, and now you can see it. Breaks it right down by your projects, right? Because that's the lowest level. So very, very slick. Then come right back to it if you want to see that report again. So that was the budget versus actual. This was just a report showing you the approved project spend, right? So once, as I showed you when you click on those triggers, if you will, from pending to approved, this is what's just going to show you which projects, when it's approved, things like that. This one here, it's pre-approved, right? So it's going to show you everything, right, before those triggers are incorporated, right? So you still have the flexibility to see in both ways, right? You might only care about what's approved, but maybe you're interested to maybe potentially see what's not approved, and just to see what that looks like. So you have best of both worlds. And then this one is really just showing you some, revenues, some costs, the profit, for different, managers, your project managers. So at the end of the day, as I mentioned, anything that you've incorporated within the solution, the details, you'll be able to break them down and report on them as necessary. And now let me quickly create a report for you. So here we go. So this is the grid that you're going to have, right? You're going to have the rows, columns, and walk you through as I build this out. So these reports typically are created and built down to the account. So as I mentioned, we're enforcing your chart of account structure. So you'll be able to break it down as you want, your asset, liability, and so on. You can also create your different metric accounts, right? Let me just open that up to show you what these can potentially be, right? So it's whatever you want, whatever you have. But also you can create reports based on model accounts, cube accounts. Those correspond to those different types of sheets that I walked you through earlier. But for here, I'm just going to create by dragging and dropping, bring in all my expenses. Let's see, maybe I do want to bring in some kind of KPI or some kind of metric, right? So just drag and drop just like that. I want to create a very simple comparison report. So let me show you how to do that. And what do I want to compare? I want to compare my versions. So I have a few different versions here. let's go with actuals versus the budget. And to do or to incorporate that variance, it's a calculation and it's a difference at the end of the day. So just bring that in here. I'll bring another one. I'll show you why. Let's change this name. I'm just going to call this variance dollar. And this one, variance percent. Flip this percent. And we're almost done, right? So now what do we want for filters, parameters? They're adding some filters here, really just focusing exactly what we want to look at, right? So I want to look at my levels. So if I just want to look at a report that has that's my entire company, I just drag it all in. If I want to focus on a particular part of the organization, you just go to it and bring it all in. But I'm just going to bring top level, top of the house. I also want to look at the time when this is for, right? You can bring in as many years of history as you want to. Most organizations bring in 2 to 5, but again, if you have more and you want to bring in more, absolutely, the more the merrier, as I like to put it. So I'm just going to bring current year. So now I'm actually going to bring the level over here, to the parameter. Doing that allows the user to, when they're looking at the report, to actually drill down to a different part of the organization. Because again, right now it's going to be top of the house. So let me show you what I mean. Click play to run it. And there's my report, strictly expenses and a couple of metrics. You'll see that breakout there. Easy. Actual versus budget. There's your variance, dollar percent. Click into one of these accounts. You'll see that breakout instantly. So that is one of the key things about Adaptive, is that you are not building that drill path capability that I just showed you here a few moments ago as well. That comes automatic with the solution. A lot of solutions out there, you have to build, you have to design that drill path capability. Here in Adaptive, once you bring in the information, your structure and all that detail, you're ready to go. So that is there. So now you can see this little drop down here. So that is why I put that into the parameter. If I didn't have that, it would only look at it at that top level, which is fine. But what if on the fly you wanted to break it down and see it by a different part? You wouldn't be able to do that unless you did what I just did there. So very easy to create a report in Adaptive. And now let me show you some dashboards. Excuse me. So these are just some dashboards. So this is where you're going to get those visuals, as I mentioned, right? So you have, different KPIs that you can look at. You have different types of reports that you can, or graphs that you can see here as well, line graphs, embed them with some, columns. It's really up to you. But these different graphs and all these dashboards are really, really dynamic, right? You can go drill right into them, right? So as soon as you go in, you'll be able to look at different things that you want to potentially drill down to. Maybe you want to go by, I don't know, owner type. Break it down, gives you a little bit more detail. Let's go by, I don't know, by level, right? So that level structure, because we actually want to look at this down to that lowest level, which again is, in this instance, the project. Keep going down until you see those projects, right? And there we go. One more, I believe. Yep, there you go. So just for a couple of clicks, you can go from that top of the house of that detail down to that lowest level. So now you can see that these projects are feeding that revenue at that total there. So very, very slick. But at the end of the day, anything can be incorporated here. Maybe for labor, you want to go maybe by, I don't know, contract size. And then you maybe want to drill down a little bit more into like maybe client or customer, right? And then you want to break it down even further within that particular customer. Maybe you have different projects, right? So maybe a project title or something like that. Yeah, yep, have one right there. So there you go. That's the name of it. But again, if you have that customer has multiple projects under him or her, you'll see that there. Really, really powerful. So again, a lot of visibility there, just for a couple of different things that you want to potentially look at. And even here, you can have multiple tabs for different things that you might need. Financial impacts. This is more on the project side of it, right? Percent cost by project, percent complete by project, right? So waterfalls, right? Pie charts, all this information is there for you. But something for me that's really, really, really powerful, right? So now here you can see the entire pie chart. As you scroll along to them, you can see all those details as you go in. But also, what if you're thinking about potentially getting rid of a project? So down below here, you can instantly remove a couple or as many as you want, but just like that, it instantly recalculates on the fly, right? So you don't have to worry about, creating a new version, deleting the details for that particular project to see it, and then going back and seeing what it looks like. You can quickly take a quick, shot in the dark, see what it looks like. And then if it makes sense to do so, then you can go back, create the new version and delete what you need to, and you're good to go. And there you have it. And now you can just, again, same thing, drill down into these, look at the information as you need to, just like that, a little bit more, and now it breaks it down. Right. So again, a lot of simplicity, but very, very powerful. But with that being said, just because it's looks powerful doesn't mean it's difficult to create. Let me show you how easy these can be also to create. Just gonna call this new dashboard. And here we go. So here are your visuals, your options. Let's see, I'm just gonna go with pie chart, keep it simple, right? Here, this little folder, this shows you, similar to when I created that standard account, shows you all your different general ledger accounts and all model cube, metric accounts, all of it, all that detail is there for you. And here are your accounts. I'm just gonna drag and drop my costs just to have something in there. Just one big number because I haven't broken it out in any way yet. Let me show you how easy it is to break out. Let's go by dimension. I want to go by level attributes, and now we have some details here, and I'm just going to go by, I don't know, project title. And there you have it, right? Keep adding more charts if you really need to, KPI as well. And again, as I mentioned, maybe you want to do waterfall, there's waterfall. And now pick and choose what you want to go into them, right? So KPI might be a metric. Let's see which ones we have again. I'll just pick net income just to have something in there. And then for the waterfall, maybe something like revenue. And done. And as we have it, instantly have that drill down. Again, as I mentioned, you never will have to create the drill path. Right? It's there for you everywhere you go, everywhere you work. Very, very powerful. So that is the dashboard capability, right? So again, very slick. You'll be able to really just create those visuals on the fly. You'll even be able to embed, sheets into these different dashboards. So if you want to make changes to a sheet, you'll definitely be able to do that and instantly see what it looks like. And now, and third is Office Connect. So this is Office Connect. Yes, this is Excel, but it's not Excel in that typical sense, right? When you're creating these, these types of graphs, presentation report graphs, it usually takes a long time, right? And a lot of effort goes into these because a lot of formulas, a lot of things that change. This is more of a kind of a rolling report, whereas now March details are finalized and you want to bring them in. Something as simple as adding a column, moving that formula into the next column that just got created. Just doing that for all these details makes this an arduous task. And not to mention, what if all these other tabs that are part of your deck, your presentation deck, they also have to be moved and created for March, right? In this particular example. Again, that takes a long time. With Adaptive, with Office Connect, you don't have to worry about that. That's because all of these details, there are no formulas on here, as you can see right in there. So you make a change, it won't break. You just refresh it because all the detail is pulling directly from the solution. As I click here, it says link cells. You're seeing everything just got highlighted. That's all the detail that's pulling from Adaptive. So you never have to worry about that information being lost in the shuffle, if you will. But then now let me actually show you what I mean by that, right? So, but also as I go into these different, tabs, you'll see, February, because that's where we are. Now let me change this. So let's actually bring in the total month. But if you want to go day by day, absolutely, you have no restrictions there. And now we can refresh it all. You can obviously refresh sheet by sheet, but that just does it all one big fell swoop. As you can see, March changed, all of these changed as well, right? So again, that right there in itself is a powerful time saver that all users that have access to Office Connect will work on and will have. So that really is what I had for my presentation. Thank you for your time, and I'll hand it back over to my my colleague Lee. Lee, feel free to take it away.
Great. Thanks, Alberto. All right. So now that we've seen a sample of the model in action, the next steps are for us to think about how do we want to put the model into use. Okay. So the first thing I like to think about is what metrics do you want to calculate? So once you define these metrics, we want to make sure that the model includes everything that we need to perform the calculations. For example, you can't calculate a site inspection pass percentage if you're not storing your total site inspection somewhere. So we want to make sure that we understand our metrics, we understand our formulas, most importantly, store the data needed for those formulas. Okay. We also want to think further about allocations. Okay. So as I stated earlier, the ultimate goal is to ensure that your costs are, that all of your costs are assigned to the areas that benefit from the cost. So the first step that we want to do is we want to define which costs do we want to allocate. And once we know which costs we want to allocate, then we want to think about which drivers to use to perform the allocations. For example, maybe we want to use dollars, maybe we want to use units, maybe we want to focus on personnel details. And when defining these drivers, we want to remember that each allocation can and probably should use different set of drivers. And while it makes sense to allocate marketing costs based on the units sold or maybe the units produced, that same driver probably doesn't make sense when allocating our office utilities. Because the selection of which driver we want to use is important because this impacts your overall profitability results of the job. If you select a driver that doesn't really have an impact on the target, this can make an area appear much less profitable than it really is. For example, maybe I have a small sales department and they're not really too technically savvy. If I allocate IT costs based on headcount, then my department may look very profitable since a small amount of these costs are getting sent there. But if I allocate those same IT costs based on the number of support calls coming in, then it could have a major impact on my department's profitability. So we want to think about the business logic behind how do we do our allocations. Okay. And this is also our opportunity to rethink our overall business process. Okay. Maybe you thought about changing the way you plan revenue, or maybe you want to thought about the way you structure reports. The implementation of a new system gives you this opportunity, gives you the opportunity to define a brand new process, a brand new planning approach, and brand new calculations. And these new processes also give us a great opportunity to reassess our reports. So at the start of projects, we typically recommend that clients look at their existing reports and then categorize them into one of three buckets. I like to break down our buckets into must have, nice to have, and reports that we can eliminate. Okay? Must have reports. These are the things that need to be converted. These are the things that are required to be available as soon as our new chart of accounts, as soon as our new model is active. Okay, that's our top priority. Secondary, nice to have. These are the things that can be recreated over time. It's not required for go live, but it is something that we're going to want to do. Okay. Now, this is the big piece. Reports that can be eliminated. These are the kinds of things where maybe you have reports that are redundant to other reports. Maybe you have reports that have no significant reporting value or analytical value. And this is a hard part. This is the part where you want to think through. You want to be somewhat subjective about this and not take emotions into play of, I put a lot of effort into this report. You want to think through what really makes sense. For example, we had one client at the start of a project that told us that they had over 1,000 reports to be recreated. We worked with the client, we reviewed, we optimized, we merged what they had. End result, we brought down their 1,000+ reports into 98 reports. We found that a lot of these reports that were being produced had no business benefit. We actually found that some of them weren't even looked at. Okay? Look through your reports, great opportunity. And this is also an opportunity for you to think about how you want to plan. Okay? One thing to consider is the amount of details that you want to input. Okay? Another example, we had an insurance client that originally wanted to plan for every one of their policies. They later decided that that was far too granular and too hard for the users, so they changed their process to something at a bit more of a high level. Great results. They ended up with faster overall budgeting process. They ended up with faster processing, much quicker reports. Okay? And it also gave them the opportunity to think about who's going to be doing the planning. Okay. This gives you the ability to redefine who's going to be doing the inputs. This is your opportunity to have your end users do more data entry instead of having just a few people do the entry for everyone. Not only does this concept of centralizing or decentralizing your process eliminate some of your redundancy, but it also allows your main finance team to do more analysis and less data entry. We encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. While you're there, we also encourage you to visit our Knowledge Center, where we offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the planning process. Technical tips on the tool, planning tips about the budgeting process, and various tips on other business aspects of your FP&A model.